But the basic stone here is this stuff, which is from Copacabana, which we'll actually be able to see the mountain from the top of the Acapana. And then the red sandstone we'll see near where the quarry is. It's up over top of a mountain. So the 131-ton block that's still there, they had to cut it, bring it over the mountain, drag it across to here. And the stuff from the andesite from Copacabana is supposedly on top of a mountain. That's where the quarry is. And archaeologists say that they built reed boats and threw these megalithic blocks on and sailed them down. It's like,
as you do.
Have you actually built a boat and put one of these on? No. Don't tell me what to do, because I'm an archaeologist. And the greenstone, we'll see better examples of that over there in Tiwanaku, and that is very high in copper content. So again, that might be the raw material that was used in the smelting facility over here, or it might be the first stage of product. You know, they may have had to melt it or heat it to one stage and then heat it higher to separate the different metals.
So you can see here these water channels that have been placed outside the museum, and you can see how they're andesite and they're sandstone. Very magnetic red sandstone. These were inside the Acapana pyramid and also at Pumapunku. But what it was, there was a roof put over each, like a slab, so it would trap the water as it moved through. And the electric charge would create these kind of particles in the air, which would be charged, and then when and it'd trap it in there. So when you placed your seeds at a certain place, it would charge them up with that energy. And they had little waterfall dropping, and the water was moving around, so the whole water was charged, like in Victor Schauberger's idea. But also at Pumapunku, you find the same kind of water channels actually going right out into the fields. So they were this charged water, this fresh, powerful water, was irrigating their land as well. So it's like multi-purpose water irrigation system, and it charged the seeds at the same time, which guaranteed a good crop and fertility for the year. So just behind me here at Pumapunku, you can see more of these sort of sluice gates, these kind of channels where the water would run down, same as we get on the Acapana pyramid in Tiwanaku. And according to John Burke, these actually went all the way out into the fields where they were growing the crop. So it was like a complete system, not just to charge the seeds up, but to actually continue into the entire field system around Pumapunku.
That one's there. We took rare earth magnets, and they just went boing, boing, boing. Okay.
Which one is that?
The big one in the background.
So this is a 131 ton or more sandstone block, which was brought from at least 50 miles away around Lake Titicaca. We actually saw the mountain when we drove by it a couple of days ago. But look, you can see, like on here, just stretch the rope, you see lots of little holes along the top there. I don't know if you can't really see them here, but I'll try and zoom in so at least we can have a look on camera. And you can see along the top there's like lots of little drill holes, and these, I think, is where they would have placed gold over the top of it, and so it'd be like the Coricancha. And it's the same idea of like it would also transmit energy around the site.
On that one?
The same with the clamps. So at the very top there, there's a better one over there I think we can look at. Also noticed along this very large piece of rock here, you can just see it, there's scoop marks. Now this is remarkably similar to what we saw on the outer edge of the Temple of the Three Windows at Machu Picchu, as well as Ollantay Tambo and other sites. So this just shows you that the technique that was used here was also used at these other sites, which quite possibly could have been influenced by the Tiwanaku culture, or whoever built these sites. You're right, so on this large, very large rock, which which is at least 131 tonne, and the one next to it. But these huge keystone cuts, very big ones, right next to the spirals, and several over that side as well, and along this one. And Kevin's just pointed out very large, possibly the whole length of that could be a keystone cut. Maybe that was possibly to hold it together, but quite possibly to actually generate energy around the whole site. Just standing on the top of the Panu Panów pyramid, and out there, that green grassy knoll in the distance, actually the edge of the pyramid, and it would have been like a port onto the lake, because beyond that, in ancient times, the lake would have come up that far. And you can see along the edge here, just about the edges of the lower levels of the pyramid, where it would have gone into the lake. This is also where they probably would have taken water from for cultivation, or they could have also had spring water coming down from the mountains in the area.
So one of the most intriguing things about Panu Panów and Tiwanaku is the source of the stone. The red sandstone comes from behind that mountain over there. And the gray andesite comes from that mountain way in the distance. That's at least 50 kilometers away.
These steps here, down at the sort of lower level of Panu Panów, going up to the top there, are some original steps that have been extremely weathered by either the water that may have flooded the area to cause the cataclysm, or just simply by age. There's no way I can see that these are just a few hundred years old. They look much, much older. Just behind me you can see one of the water channels. This would have had water coming down at very fast speed. You can see the way the rocks on top of it are actually kind of compressing it, so it keep the trapped charged particles in there. It's also got the keystone cuts. Now you wouldn't really need keystone cuts unless, because the stones would have stayed together, I'm sure, if they were built correctly. So I think they were used definitely for energy, transference of energy through the copper or bronze or the orichalcum or whatever they used. And this is a fine example of what John Burke talks about in his book Seed of Knowledge, Stone of Plenty, where he's very convincing argument that this whole site, including the Akapana pyramid, but also here at Panu Panów, was a generator for energy to create and charge up seeds, to increase fertility of the crops. But with these channels, they often go down right into the fields around them, which is equally fascinating, suggesting the charged water was being used. You can see evidence of where water has moved down these channels, which does give good evidence that indeed they were used for that purpose. What's also interesting here is the fact that we have the andesite blocks right next to the red sandstone, the magnetic red sandstone, then andesite again. So we have alternative stone, different types of stone, which could have again created an energetic effect throughout the whole system here at Panu Panów.
Flight over the megalithic Devil's Doorway in Peru. Brought to you by hiddenincatours.com. In the very southern area of Peru, near the border of Bolivia, is this massive red sandstone outcrop, whereas most of the land in the surrounding area is very flat, approaching Lake Titicaca itself. And it's here, in this massive area of vertical red sandstone that we find a very curious place known by quite a few tourists, but actually unexplainable by either local people or most academic archaeologists. It's called locally the Devil's Doorway, but it's also known as Aramumuru and Amarumuru, and here you can start to see it. It's a false door carved into the stone. Now, no one knows who made it and when it was made. Obviously, the great Inca culture utilized this site, but they were not necessarily the ones who did the original construction. We don't see any evidence of lost ancient high technology because the carving in the rock is relatively crude. However, it is supposedly a one-of-a-kind creation in Peru. You see channels on the left side and the right side, and then what appears to be a doorway in the center. People who are very good at dowsing with dowsing rods have noticed that the energy on the left and right side channels are female, whereas the doorway itself is male or masculine. The energy doesn't necessarily come out of the door and channels or in. According to the dowsers, the energy is actually pulsing. And what's intriguing is that the red sandstone itself is very high in iron content, and iron, of course, conducts energy and electricity. It's been a place of pilgrimage for hundreds, if not thousands of years, a place of meditation, and it's a very intriguing place that we invite you to come and see with us. Now here actually you see our driver, who is from the area. He knows how to utilize this doorway in order to channel the energy. There is a depression in the middle of the door, which is where
what are the legends, what are the myths, and also what do the conquistadors think? Because when the conquistadors came to Tiwanaku and the chroniclers, there was a lot more there to be seen than what's there now. So we were very interested to know what was their take. And you asked what one of the more incredible things was to discover that the conquistadors, the chroniclers, and the Inca all believed that the megaliths in Peru were built by a pre-flood civilization. And I'm not superimposing this idea of a great flood, a biblical flood, onto their accounts.
So they have flood stories in their culture.
This is what they say. This is what the Incas say. This is what the well, obviously the conquistadors were Catholic, the Spanish conquistadors and the chroniclers. So they were coming from a perspective of a pre-flood world when they were looking at this these incredible megaliths. But the Inca, all the natives, in fact, knew that there was a pre-flood world. There were giants. There were the gods that existed before the Great Flood. And that what you're looking at Pumapunku, especially Pumapunku and Sacsayhuaman and some of the stuff at Ollantaytambo is pre-flood. It occurred before the Great Flood that destroyed those great civilizations that were pre-Inca.
Why do you think the Bolivian government is so reluctant to have people look at these remains, this site up close?
No, there's a number of reasons. For one thing, I think they're getting a lot of attention because of Ancient Aliens.
Sure.
So I think a lot of people have gone themselves with cameras and want to get up close and measure things and touch the stones. They're probably irritated about that.
Well, yes, you can understand they'd want to protect those.
Yeah, but it's not really about protection because you're dealing with andesite stone. You're dealing with humongous blocks of andesite. Touching that andesite isn't going to do anything to it. The real issue is the state-sanctioned narrative that they're protecting. And so their narrative, and you hear it everywhere you go in Tiwanaku. All the guides say the exact same thing. You feel like, again, it's like a police state over there. And if you don't go along with what they're saying, they get very irritated. Believe me, we know that firsthand at this point. And their narrative is basically that everything that you see in that area in Tiwanaku was built somewhere between 500 and 900 AD. That's basically what they're saying, which is a load of crock, really. I mean, it's so evident. Most of what is at Pumapunku is buried 6 feet under the ground. Only 10% of that whole area has been excavated.
Really?
Only 10%. And much of what has been excavated, they stopped. For some reason, they decided to stop at Pumapunku, where the most incredible stuff is. And the Bolivian military at one time used what was there as target practice.
Kind of like Napoleon did with the pyramids.
Yeah, for their artillery, exactly. And so they blew a lot of it to pieces, and then also a lot of it has been plundered over the years. So there's hardly anything really there at this point to look at in terms of Pumapunku.
You're drawing conclusions from a very small sample.
The speculations that have been drawn regarding Pumapunku are ridiculous.
Sure.
Because there's hardly anything there. But if you go back in the history and you work back from history and you look at what the Inca said, what the conquistador said, Arthur Poznański and all these different people who studied it, this is pre-flood. It was decimated in the Great Flood, which we know as the Great Flood of Noah.
Because, you know, he's traveled in all this, and it's just a bunch of nonsense. Native Americans, First Nation people, did not do these type of building structures. They didn't do it. And again, all these sites, like the Great Circle Mountain in Ohio, it's in just a short distance away, the Octagon Mountain is there, are all aligned to the planets, to the stars, to the Pleiades.
Yes.
It's extremely deliberate. Extremely deliberate, and I find that absolutely fascinating.
They were following a pattern of some kind.
Sure.
And a pattern and a plan. Probably they were trying to enact some control system whereby they could control the whole world. I mean, if they're doing things on that scale, they've got the world in mind. And it seems to me that they were not godly people. They were following Satan just by sheer logic. You have to come up with that idea.
In all these sites, Gary, in every site I just mentioned, the America Stonehenge, Teotihuacan, Sacsayhuaman, and other sites, Chichen Itza, and other sites, there is always evidence, even the Circle Mountain in Ohio, there is always evidence of human sacrifice. In fact, America Stonehenge is chilling because in the middle and the center of that henge, there's a chamber. And that chamber, by the way, is covered with a clay it's turned like to concrete, which is completely waterproof. The interior of the chamber. The interior of the chamber is dry, and you're surrounded by megalithic stones, and there's like a sort of like a causeway that goes underneath the altar. So someone would be in there, and you would hear their voice sounding like it was coming out of the ground. Well, where the altar is, and it is an altar, by the way, there's this 10-foot by 6-foot slab of granite. I believe it's granite. And in that granite, and here's the other thing, once again, we see a channel that's cut all the way around that granite. And the granite is tilted this way. And it's a sacrificial table. And at the end of the granite, there's another little channel to allow the blood to go out. Why are they doing this? Why the blood sacrifice? And this disturbs archaeologists because, well, you know, they sort of tap dance around. They don't want to get into the whole idea of human sacrifice or cannibalism, but that's what it is. And isn't it interesting how it ties back to the Book of Enoch, which describes exactly what we see, the idea of human sacrifice, the idea of cannibalism. We see it in America Stonehenge. We read about it in the Book of Enoch. Fascinating.
And by the way, we find that copied in by the natives, the native peoples of South America, what's today called South America. You have the Incas and the Aztecs, and they were very, very heavily into blood sacrifice,
Very much so.
Human sacrifice. And where did they get that idea? Which gods were they sacrificing to? And so there's a connection there too.
Yeah, I've never been to Chichen Itza, but I certainly have studied it. And I know that 50,000, upwards of 50,000, perhaps even more, people were ritualistically sacrificed. If you ever go to that site, folks, you really need to be prayed up, really prayed up, because you are entering a charged site which is holy to them. I mean, it's a demonically charged site where 50,000 people were literally sacrificed to open up the gateway to the gods with a little g. And of course, the gods that they're worshiping, in my opinion, and I know you embrace this too, are the fallen host of heaven, the fallen angelic host of heaven that serve Hasatan, Satan,
Now,
the dragon.
this message that you're coming up with, and you're developing it as time goes by, and we've sort of followed your lead on this, this message seems timed for today. In other words, a century ago, century and a half ago, this message was still dormant. It was buried. Nobody
Very much
was
so.
talking about any
Very
of it.
much so.
But it has become a threat right now. Exposing all this, it has been difficult for you because you find cover-ups everywhere you go. There are people who don't want this information out. Tell us a little about that.
Well, it's absolutely true. For instance, and I'll sort of spill the beans a little bit on this, but we were in Catalina, and this is all on the Trail of the Nephilim, Volume 2. But when in Catalina, I was able to go into a cache of records that had been missing for 50 or 60 years. Ralph Glidden, it was all of the cache of records reflected Ralph Glidden's work. They were his personal notes, his journals, his letters, his photographs, all had gone missing. Ralph Glidden was an archaeologist, quote, sort of an archaeologist, a primitive archaeologist, employed by the High Museum. The High was later gobbled up by the Smithsonian. So Glidden is doing all this work, 1919 and 1921. He's digging up lots of Native American remains all over the Channel Islands, which are from Santa Barbara on the west coast of the United States down to San Diego, the Channel Islands. Well, I contributed $1,000 to the museum, and I was able to go and look at these records, which had been lost basically for decades. And it was a sanitized collection. In other words, everything had already been poured over, cataloged, put in manila folders and museum boxes and stowed away. So I'm not looking at what's this, as if pulling it out of a trunk. It's not that way at all.
Yeah.
And so the museum boxes came out. The first thing I wanted to look at were the photographs. And remember, I'm going in there with a biblical filter. I'm looking for giants. I'm looking for elongated skulls. I'm looking for 6 fingers. That's what I'm looking for. I found all 3 in the pictures, and all those pictures are in On the Trail of the Nephilim too. What's incredible is one picture which was actually picked up by the History Channel, and I was on that last season in Search of a Lost Giants. They used that picture. It shows Ralph Glidden standing in a recently excavated grave, and in front of him is a large giant. You told me, you gave me the lead on this, that there are people who can take that photograph and digitize it and determine the height, if you know the height of just some known objects. And we had shovels, and Ralph Glidden, who was 5'8", that was, many people came on the record and said he was 5'8". And we were able to ascertain through 3 different researchers working independently of each other that giant in front, that skeleton in front of Glidden was just shy of 9 feet. And that's unprecedented. Here's the kicker. This is a first, and I'm happy to do it on Prophecy Watchers. When we went back to the museum just a short while ago, and we walked in the museum, that picture that I discovered and the History Channel used is now blown up, and it's on the wall, except, and I'll give you the JPEG of this, except they have cropped the picture. So the giant is no longer in that shot. All you see is Ralph Glidden holding a shovel like this and sort of leaning to one side. The giant has been cropped. That is a deliberate obfuscation. When I went to the curator and asked, why did you guys do this? The curator said, well, we didn't want to offend NAGPRA, too many Native American skeletons being shown. And I said, look at all the rest of the pictures in this museum. All they are is Native American bones. And this is the one picture that might not be Native American. And that's the one you don't show the people, which would alter the Darwinian paradigm, and that's why they don't do it.
Just happened to be the picture that ascertained the size or the height of a particular giant. Therefore, it's no good. It has to go.
Absolutely. Hidden.
Greenfield, Indiana, August 8th, I believe. UFO sighting. As you can see, there's one right there, 3 right there, another one right there. I've seen 15 so far. Planes can't, there's no way. Look at that. So now there's only 4. The other ones are gone. Oh my goodness. These aren't planes. Another one just appeared. Look at that. Look at that. They just keep coming. They just keep coming. Look, another one just appeared. How is this pop? Look at this. And another one. Oh my goodness, they just keep coming.
But let me get to this question here. Now, this may be a little bit off topic, but one of the viewers just sent it in. It says, this person says they were abducted at age 5 in 1967. What would you tell somebody that has been abducted?
Oh, wow. Yeah, my wife has gone through something similar to that. She witnessed a UFO, and I have that. I'm actually... That's a really good question. I'm working on another book that's all about spiritual warfare, and a big part of that book is what to do about these alien encounters. It's my belief that they're not. I don't believe that the beings that are presenting themselves to people and abducting people, especially, I don't believe that they're physical beings from another planet. They very well may be physical, but I think their origins are a lot more ancient and really eternal than that. One of the biggest things, and this is like the biggest cover-up in the whole UFO community, and I don't know. I mean, I know why they would do it, but it's so ridiculous because MUFON and all they hate cover-ups. They want official disclosure, but they're covering something up. Every single time that if a Christian or somebody of faith is in Jesus, if they go through an abduction experience and they call out the name of Jesus, the abduction stops every time. And I haven't had like an actual alien encounter per se, but I have had encounter with spiritual beings, and it's the same thing. When a person calls on the name of the Lord and uses the name of Jesus because that's where a Christian's authority is, to get this to stop, they have to obey. So they're under that authority. If they were just aliens from another planet, they would have nothing to do with Jesus. They wouldn't have, there would be no authority there. But the fact that, a Christian can stop it, and it has nothing to do with, the Christian themselves, that's not where the power is. The power is in Jesus. So with abductions, my first thing would be, you got to get saved. That's the first thing. Start a relationship with God, and that can just be a simple step of faith and saying that, Jesus, I know, I know I'm a sinner, and I want to learn more about you, and I really want to, invite you into my life, and let's talk, let's figure this out, and He will, and it even says in the Bible that if we draw nigh to God, He'll draw nigh to us. So He'll meet us halfway, but we got to make the first step. So that would be my first thing. Second thing is, when an abduction happens, just call on the name of Jesus and say, just basically, you can just say, in the name of Jesus, I command you to leave. And they will, it might take a couple times. It depends on where your faith is, or other things. And if you're still having problems, fasting and praying is really important too. But through all of those, I've never known anybody that's taken that seriously and that it hasn't worked. People that actually take that seriously and actually do trust in Jesus to help them out of that situation, they get the help that they need, and those abductions will stop. So that would be my best advice.
Here's something. I just got a text from my son who says that he has seen a swarm of UFOs, and he's got video.
Oh, wow. I'd love to see that.
So if that works out, I don't know what it looks like, but definitely I'm gonna check that out. And from minutes ago.
Wow. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Wow, you talk about breaking. That's breaking edge news right there. I'm going to put the video up for everybody who's watching. This is the video my son just sent me of a UFO swarm. Let's get this going here. Let's see if it'll play. I got a lot of technical stuff going. Here it is right here. Those three objects there. There's actually, he said about 15.
Oh, wow.
He said there's actually about 15 there. Of course, it looks like a cell phone video. He'll pan back up in a second.
Wow. Like I said earlier, I'm not a big believer in coincidence, and part of me wants to say, we've been talking about this stuff, and then all of a sudden they're showing up, to your son, and he's sending you this video. Part of me wants to wonder if that's connected.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, for those, I see him in the live chat still asking. It's in Greenfield, Indiana there, so that's where he is.
They know we're talking about him, Daniel.
Wow.
Those two worldviews address the basic questions of life. What is reality? What does it mean to be human? Where do we go when we die? Things like that.
Those are the basic worldview questions, and I cover several versions of those in the book. Some of the simple ones are things like, who are we? Why do we exist? What's the problem? Those kind of ultimate questions that children ask. Daddy, why am I here?
Yeah.
Basic questions about reality, and that's what the worldview will answer. So naturalism holds that nature is ultimate. All right, so chemistry, physics, those laws, those are the ultimate laws of the universe. A supernatural worldview is something above nature, something outside of nature. Now, the reason I say science is undermining materialism and naturalism is Big Bang cosmology, okay? They say at some point in time, before time began actually, everything came into existence from nothing, okay? That includes nature. So whatever started nature is by definition above nature. In Latin, that's supra, naturalis, supernatural. So there has to be a supernatural to get it all started.
Interestingly enough, though, there are physicists who are now proposing that the steady state theory, which was debunked in favor of or rejected in favor of the Big Bang theory, is now the best model to describe the nature. In other words, the universe has always existed and always will exist, and is that just an attempt from the remnants of the naturalists in the scientific realm to try to get away from what might be a supernatural explanation for the creation of everything?
I tend to think that's true. They've never liked the Big Bang Theory. None of them. I mean, even the guys that came up with it hated it. Fred Hoyle was one of the scientists who just absolutely detested it because of the implications. Because nature is not ultimate, if that's the case.
There has to be an external force acting on whatever it was that existed before everything.
Something had to cause it.
Right.
And, the cosmological argument. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore, the universe has a cause. And since it caused nature, it has to be supernatural. Now, what's driving most of this eternal universe reasoning that we're seeing now is multiverse ideas, things like that, is what they call the Anthropic Principle. And this is the idea that the whole universe was designed with us in mind for intelligent life. Just the fact that the chemical elements are the way they are, the way the Earth is, all these things line up to make intelligent life possible. Okay, the constants of physics are finely tuned, to like a millionth, of a percentage. If it was just a little bit off, we wouldn't exist. How do you explain that? By accident. Things like that don't happen by accident.
Again, it implies a designer, which implies God.
And so if you can propose there are an infinite number of universes, then in one of them, you just happen to be in the one where those conditions exist, and lucky us. And so it's kind of the lucky us theory.
Okay. the miracle liquid is, and that's kind of how it is for us in the West. We've been soaked in this positivist worldview that nothing exists that we can't measure through observation.
Right.
And of course, the supernatural realm. As you would define supernatural means, it's something that cannot be explained by natural means.
Exactly.
But the implications of a naturalist worldview have led to scientific research into the supernatural. And you write that it's because naturalists cannot live consistently with the philosophical conclusions of their worldview. What do you mean by that?
It's a hopeless worldview. I mean, if atheism is true, if naturalism is true, then, you die, you get thrown in the ground, you get eaten by worms, that's the end of it, and there's no justice. I mean, Adolf Hitler got away with it, basically. There is no ultimate justice if naturalism is true. There's no hope. There's no hope that you'll ever see your loved ones again or any of those things. And people are not comfortable living that way. I mean, it's not our nature. We know better internally. The Bible said that God put eternity in men's hearts so that they would seek him. And I think that's absolutely true. And that's why people can't live consistently with a naturalist worldview. Even naturalists will come out and say things completely inconsistent with what they say they believe when it comes right down to it, when they're forced to.
In other words, they do believe that there are things like ultimate truth. I mean, we can all agree that there are certain things that are absolutely, unquestionably evil.
Right. Well, some people will say there's no absolute truth, right? There's no absolute morality. Then ask them a question like, well, give me an example when torturing babies for fun is a morally virtuous activity.
Exactly.
And of course there's not.
Which implies, of course, that there is some absolute truth, absolute definition of good and evil.
If there's one, then it exists.
Yeah.